Welcome to the Rockwood Board of Education meeting. We would like to thank the administrative team and all of the staff and students at Rockwood Summit High School for being gracious to host our meeting this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to conduct the business of the district, hear reports about our progress, and listen to the community on important issues. We want to remind all of our visitors that we expect the audience to remain civil and respectful at all times as the board conducts its business. We want to have everyone have the ability to see and have the ability to hear the business of the district, reports presented, and the comments of everyone who is here to speak. So if you have a sign, we ask that you keep it down low so you're not obstructing the views of others. We appreciate your cooperation and that you took the time to attend tonight's meeting. Again, thank you. The first order of business is approval of the agenda. The motion is to approve tonight's agenda.
Motion.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please signify by yay.
Yay.
Any opposed? That motion carries. The next motion is to approve the Board of Education meeting minutes for December 3rd, 2024.
So moved.
Discussion? All those who approve, please signify by yay.
Yay.
Any opposed? That motion passes. The next is the approval of the Board of Education meeting minutes for December 5, 2024. The motion is to approve the Board of Education meeting minutes for December 5, 2024.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by yay.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion also passes. We are at patron comments, in which we have some tonight. I'll read the introduction. During patron comments, citizens may address the Board of Education concerning agenda items. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes, and the patron comments period is limited to 30 minutes total. Combining time or giving your time to someone else to speak is not allowed. Only one speaker is allowed at the podium at a time. Please note that at the board's discretion, the board or superintendent may respond immediately to an issue raised during patron comments for clarification. However, our general practice is to respond to the comments at a later time via a phone call or written message if a response is needed. We have a table with a microphone ready so both the board and the audience may hear the patron comments clearly, and that is back there. If anyone has submitted a comment card, does not get the opportunity to speak, please know that you also have the opportunity to submit your comments in writing to the board at any time. The board appreciates that you have taken the time to come this evening, and we value both your input and your perspective. For your convenience, we have our 3-minute time clock ready. And we welcome Mindy White to step forward.
My name is Mindy White, and I'm a teacher in the Rockwood School District, taxpayer, and a concerned parent. Tonight, I stand before you to speak not as an educator, but as a mother who deeply cares about the future of this district. As we continue the budget process, I have a growing concern that Rockwood may struggle to retain and attract the quality teachers our children deserve. This is a very personal issue for me. I'm the mother of 3 children in the district, 2 of whom with a learning disability. With their permission, I'd like to introduce you to the faces of the people your decision will impact. These are the children, my children, whose futures are shaped by the educators in this district. Isaac, my oldest, was diagnosed with a learning disability in 2nd grade, but today is excelling in advanced classes at the middle school level. Crosby, my 4th grader, was diagnosed with dyslexia, and Charlie, my other 4th grader of mine, received a learning diagnosis in 2nd grade. Both Charlie and Crosby scored in the 40th percentile in their STAR reading assessment. And I shared this with you not to boast about my children, but to emphasize the importance of quality education. None of this would have been possible without the dedication and expertise of the educators who worked tirelessly to meet their needs. These teachers have gone above and beyond using research-based interventions, spending countless hours outside of regular school time, and tailoring the teaching methods to ensure that my children and so many others have the opportunity to succeed. This is why I'm here tonight, these three faces. The reason I'm fighting for our teachers. Our children, all of them, need educators who are not just highly qualified, but truly care and willing to do whatever it takes to reach their potential. While Rockwood has a reputation for excellence, we are facing an alarming reality. Many of our best teachers are leaving or considering leaving for higher payer opportunities in surrounding districts. Some are even leaving the profession altogether due to the financial strain. These are the teachers who have made a real, lasting difference in my children's lives and the lives of countless others. These are the teachers we cannot afford to lose. In addition, I'm deeply concerned about the disparity in pay. Our teachers who are ranked in the bottom third of pay are struggling to make ends meet. We need to ask ourselves, how do we expect our teachers to continue to give their best when their salaries do not reflect the immense value they provide to our students? This district is carrying the strongest financial position in years. With this strong financial position, we ask that you prioritize staff salaries, including those of educators. This is an opportunity to ensure that our teachers, who are the cornerstone of our students' success, are supported and valued. For the sake of my children and all the children in Rockwood, I urge you to prioritize the support and retention of our teachers. They are the foundation of everything we celebrate. Without them, none of the academic achievements, the sports championships, or any recognition at all would be possible. If we want our district to continue to excel, we must invest in the teachers who make that success a reality. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I look forward to all of us working together to ensure the teachers who have made such a profound difference in the lives of my children and all the children in Rockwood are supported and valued accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mindy. Next is Stacy Belmont.
Good evening, members of the board, Good evening, members of the Rockwood School Board of Education and Administration. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Stacy Belmont, and I teach early childhood special education at the Clarkson Valley Early Childhood Center. I'm also a Rockwood resident and parent of 2 Lafayette High School graduates and a Rockwood Valley Middle 8th grader. I'm here to speak on agenda items 8.01 and 8.02, the importance of competitive wages. Early childhood is the first step in a child's educational journey. Many students start when they are 3 years old and potentially have another 15 years before they graduate from the Rockwood School District. If they don't love school and feel that their classroom is a safe place to learn and try new things, that could be a long, tough road. I work every day to ensure that each of my students feel safe, supported, and confident that it's okay to make mistakes, and most importantly, to try again. Since I started teaching in Rockwood, there have been many superintendents and different members of the school board. Offering competitive salaries and raising our pay ranking to midpoint has been a goal for many of them. It hasn't happened. We have for several years continually dropped lower and lower in the St. Louis County rankings. There is currently not a clear understanding why Rockwood cannot afford to pay their educators a competitive wage. According to the budget document in the agenda this evening, the district is currently in a strong financial position and appears to have the ability to pay more. No one goes into the field of education for fame and fortune, but because we love working with children. This love does not supersede the fact that educators are tired from increased expectation, less staff, less support, and less money. Our pay is not keeping pace with the increased cost of living or with the other districts around us. I respectfully request that the board and administration fund the values that they say they have, which is highly qualified staff, the ones making a difference in students' lives every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Amy Weedman?
Good evening. My name is Amy Wiedemann, and I am a first grade teacher at Callison Elementary. I began my teaching career in 1996 as a student teacher at Lafayette High School. The first time, and possibly the last time, I commented in front of the board was my second or third year as a teacher. I don't remember everything that was going on. There was a concern about our reserved funds, which back then we kind of referred to those as our rainy day funds, and something about our reading program. What I do remember is my one-liner. What I said was, it would be a rainy day in Rockwood if our students couldn't read. Well, we know that didn't happen. Our students can read. They can read well. We have an awesome phonics program starting. It's great. In fact, our test scores are some of the highest in the state. Rockwood is the highest in a lot of things. Those test scores, our sports teams, property values. I still can't afford to live here. In fact, according to Rockwood's own 2024 comprehensive financial report that we've all alluded to, page 12, the district is carrying the strongest financial position in years. Yet, here I am again as we talk about the budget, and it feels like a rainy day. It's a very rainy day in Rockwood when test scores are high, property values are high, sports teams are high, our financial position is the strongest in years, yet our teachers' salaries, the people on the front line every day making all of this happen, are not even in the middle. I ask you, Dr. Kane, Dr. Cohen, the board, please look again at the budget with fresh eyes, outside of the box ideas, to find a way to invest in the quality teachers who have invested so much time in our students. I know we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Christina Presley.
Good evening. My name is Christina Presley, and I'm the librarian at Gagey Elementary School. I'm also a Rockwood graduate, a parent of a kindergartner at Utah, and a lifelong member of this community. I'm here to speak on agenda items 8.01 and 8.02, and to emphasize the importance of fair educator compensation. I've been a part of the Rockwood School District for 34 years, starting with preschool at Vandover, continuing through student teaching at Werther. Though I can't pinpoint the exact moment I decided to become a teacher, I clearly remember the educators who inspired me. I fondly recall Mrs. Wade, my first grade teacher at Bowles, reading aloud to us after lunch. Over 20 years later, she reached out and asked if she could bring her therapy dog to Gagey to read with my students. I remember Miss Sweda, my middle school language arts teacher, who encouraged my love of reading and gave me a warm hug of congratulations when she saw me at my first professional development session. And I'll never forget Mrs. Suzanne Rainey, my high school language arts teacher, whose dedication continues to inspire me. While raising young children at home and teaching high school students, she also served our country through deployment with the Army Reserves from 2002 to 2004. After I returned to Rockwood to teach, she congratulated me and continues to serve as a mentor to me today. These are just a few of the educators who shaped my journey, and I know the success of our students and the excellence of our school would not be possible without the passion and dedication of teachers like them. Rockwood's reputation as one of the top achieving districts in the region has been built by the educators who give everything to this community. However, as much as we give, it's becoming increasingly difficult to sustain this pace without adequate compensation. Currently, educator pay in our district is below county midpoint. The gap isn't just a number, it has real-world consequences. The cost of living continues to rise, and for many of us, myself included, as part of a two-teacher household, it's becoming harder to afford basic necessities. We are working harder than ever, yet our pay does not reflect the rising cost of living, especially here in our own community. Without competitive salaries, we risk losing talented educators to neighboring districts that offer more. Aligning our salaries with county midpoint is not merely a financial decision, it's an investment in Rockwood's future. It's a clear message that we value our teachers and recognize their essential role in the success of this district. I'm advocating for the teachers who inspire and guiding our children. I ask that you recognize the importance of investing in us. I know I am not the only one in this room who is an educator, a resident, a graduate, and a parent. Many of us chose to return to the district that raised us, and now we're raising our own children here in Rockwood. And we need your support to ensure that Rockwood remains a place where exceptional educators want to work and can afford to live. Thank you.
And thank you to Christina. Next is Andrew Gensler.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Andy Gensler, a language arts teacher at EHS for 25 years. As someone who has devoted my career to our students and their learning and stayed loyal to Rockwood through the good times and the not so good times, I felt compelled to address the messaging regarding the raises offered and also how the money was allocated to the salary schedule. In the past, the district has always specified the total, but the allocations to the different steps were a collaborative effort between the district and the NEA to best meet the needs of all. This year, that changed, and the district mandated the distributions. The district messaging states that employees will receive a 12% raise over 3 years. This neglected to include the word average, and as I teach my students, words have power. For example, for experienced master teachers on step 25 with MA plus 30, our next 3 increases are 2.5%, 1.9%, and 2.2%, or 6.6% over 3 years. This isn't even keeping up with the 2.7 rate of inflation or the 2.5% cost of living increase for Social Security. This sends a pretty demoralizing message to those of us who have worked here our whole careers and are masters of our craft. I'm a Milken National Educator, a National Board Certified Teacher, and a former Rockwood School District Teacher of the Year. I could have easily gotten a job at Webster, Parkway, Kirkwood, or Pattonville and made thousands more, but I, like many of my colleagues, chose to stay in Rockwood because we believed in Rockwood and we believed we mattered. Right now, it doesn't feel that way. Such a low pay increase will directly affect our pension earnings for the rest of our lives, with an impact on us and our families for decades. I realize much of the money went to increase the starting salaries and agree it's important to attract and retain talented young teachers. But the current offer makes those of us who have served loyally for 25 or more years feel like our expertise and experience are not valued, and the district really doesn't care whether we stay or opt to retire early. Experienced teachers do matter. Countless studies have shown a direct correlation between student achievement and teacher experience. Other reports have shown a majority of new teachers leave the classroom within the first 5 years, especially if they do not have strong mentor figures and colleagues to support them. If those of us veteran teachers considering retirement feel this way, who's going to be around to provide young teachers with the support they need to develop into master teachers, as well as maintain the level of student achievement? Although I wish it were otherwise, our society conveys value through money. There's only so long we can be told, thanks for all your hard work, we really appreciate you, without also seeing that mirrored in what we are offered in compensation. According to the annual comprehensive report, the district is carrying the strongest financial position in years. With this in mind, I implore you to prioritize the salaries of staff and educators, including us longtime veterans. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. And finally, Christy Hemminghouse.
Good evening. Investing in educators is investing in students. Competitive salaries and benefits are essential to attracting and retaining the best educators for our students. If I only worked for the hours I'm officially paid for, I wouldn't be the teacher I promised myself I'd be. The calm, nurturing environment I create for my first graders, where they can learn to read and thrive, doesn't come from the district funding. It's something I make happen, often at my own expense. A government-funded classroom looks very different from one shaped by a dedicated teacher. Without adequate compensation, we risk losing talented educators to better paying districts or to other professions entirely. To keep in pace with inflation, annual cost of living adjustments are necessary. Without them, our pay effectively decreases over time. Fair compensation is directly tied to recruitment and retention, and the costs of high turnover, training, onboarding, and disruptions to student learning are significant. Retaining experienced educators fosters stability in classrooms and improves student learning outcomes. Additionally, teachers face mounting workloads without compensation. This week, for instance, I'll participate in a PLC, a professional learning community, to identify and monitor students for groups for MTSS. This process has never fully been explained, leaving staff to navigate it on their own while putting in additional time and effort, unpaid. These unrealistic expectations and the stress they create take a severe toll on our mental and physical health. For years, I relied on medication to manage the stress and anxiety caused directly by my job. At one point, my doctor told me, "You might need to find a new profession. Your blood pressure won't stabilize." The board must prioritize investments in people, salaries, benefits, and well-being over new initiatives or administrative expenses. Greater transparency is needed in budget decisions, ensuring that competitive pay is a primary focus, not an afterthought. Fair and equitable salary increases are also critical to addressing disparities between districts. Educators here should not feel undervalued compared to their peers elsewhere. This issue impacts not just teachers, but our entire community. Many educators in this district struggle to afford basic necessities due to stagnant pay. When teachers are undervalued, it affects students, families, and the stability of our schools. This board has a responsibility to listen to teachers and make decisions that reflect the realities of our classrooms. Too often, those decisions are made by people who have never set foot in them. I urge the board to fulfill its duty to students, staff, and the community by making educator salaries, benefits, and well-being a top priority. Investing in educators is an investment in students. A district that values its teachers will see the benefits reflected in a student's success, stability, and long-term savings. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. We are at superintendent comments.
Thank you, President Midget. So before I actually dive into comments as a whole, I do want to take a moment, if I could, Madam President. I would like to take a moment to address the educators who took the time to be here with us tonight. I know what week this is. I know what happens at the end of this week. Most importantly, I think everybody knows what's going to happen next week. And so what I want to do is just take a bit of time to not only address you all that are in the theater today, but also for those that will be watching this recording on video. Please know, we do recognize that we are in a difficult situation. I have said many times that the classroom is the reason that we do, in fact, have a school district. And to the comments that were made earlier, there's no question what happens in our classrooms. There's no question of what not just value you add, but what you mean to the heart of what students engage in on a daily basis, how you pour out, and how you make a difference within our community. I also want you to know that when we hear this feedback, the fact that there are hurt feelings and that people are not feeling as though they are appreciated, and that this board, I won't speak for the board, but I will speak for this administration, and I truly believe it to be true of the board, that is absolutely not where we want to be in any way, shape, or form. So regardless of where this is going to go, I will say what I have long believed to be true. Wherever we are going to go, I truly believe that we will do it best if we do it together. I've talked about this notion of together as long as I've been a superintendent, and I think that it is critically true. We would absolutely love to be in a position where we're able to provide higher increases for all staff, including teachers in the Rockwood School District. We are constantly walking this line of figuring out how we can remain as competitive as possible while maintaining what we need to maintain as it relates to fiscal responsibility. And I don't want that to fall upon deaf ears. And I don't want people to just think, here he goes again. We are more than willing to come back to the table and have conversation. There's no need for a petition for that. We've extended that offer, and that offer is genuine. We are more than willing to sit down and to have that conversation. We are at a critical inflection point where we're going to, and I want to re-emphasize, we are going to have to figure out how we best do this in terms of our next step. Now, from my humble opinion, and I can tell you from conversation that Cabinet has had, and I believe I can speak when I say that the Board of Education supports this as well, it is increasingly appearing as though we're going to have to do something at the ballot for that to take place. I was in a classroom this week. I'm just speaking to fiscal reality. I was in a classroom this week with a teacher that graduated from a high school in this district in 1989. And to Andy's point, I hear what you're saying as it relates to longevity as well, and the value that is added as a result of that. It's been since 1994 the last time this community has passed something at the ballot as relates to tax rate, specifically for staff salary. All I'm telling you is that if we're going to be able to do this and be successful, we have to figure out how to do this best, do this together, and figure out what strategic steps need to occur so that that is something that can happen. Not that it be a one-time fix. The challenges that you're expressing are not about a one-time fix. How do we figure out a solution that is sustainable so we continue to move forward as a school district and you can feel loud and proud about what you do on a daily basis? So I believe we're going to get there. I don't think that happens right now at this particular point in time, but that doesn't mean that we're ignoring the fact that we need to get there. That doesn't mean that we need to ignore the fact that we need to get there. And we're happy to have the conversation. Again, I cannot speak for the Board of Education, but I work with them closely enough to say, if you look at Proposition 3 and what we did and how we were ultimately able to do that with Proposition 3 when it came to buildings, we need to find a way to do that when it comes to people as well. So on Monday, just yesterday, Eureka High School Assistant Principal David Arledge was named the Missouri Association of Secondary Principals 2025 Assistant Principal of the Year. M. Moasp is Executive Director. Clark Mershon was on hand to surprise David Arledge as well, with his good news in front of his family and cheering staff members and students. He is now eligible to be considered for the National Association of Secondary School Principals Assistant Principal of the Year Award. I had the distinct pleasure of being there to help him celebrate earlier this week, and I would like to congratulate him again on this very exciting and very well-deserved honor. The Missouri Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has released a statewide annual performance report, which is our APRs for 2023 to 2024 school year, and Rockwood scored an 88.0, which is up 3 percentage points from 2022-2023. APRs demonstrate the progress that districts are making toward meeting the standards and indicators in the 6th version of the Missouri School Improvement Program. This is the state's system for reviewing and accrediting school districts in Missouri, and it outlines expectations for school practices and student outcomes with a goal of each student graduating ready for success in college, career, and ultimately in life. We are already in the process of enacting action steps in response to this district's ongoing review of student achievement data, and you can find out more information about these action steps on our district website. The Rockwood School District Strategic Planning Steering Committee held its 3rd meeting at the Administrative Annex on December 10th as a part of the year-long process to help prepare for our district's new strategic plan for 2025-2030. The district strategic steering committee includes students, staff members, parents, and community members who represent all grades and all 4 quadrants of the district. In addition to the committee's work, Rockwood community members will have opportunities to have their voices heard through the process of creating the strategic plan. We hope you will join us at our next community engagement meeting. That will be on January 14th at 6 p.m. It will be at Lafayette High School, and the theme will be, curiously enough, highly qualified staff. For more information about the steering committee work, please come visit the website rsdmo.org, Strategic Plan 2025. The district invites parents and guardians and community members of high school students to participate in a community read this winter. It's going to be The Anxious Generation, and that is a book by Jonathan Haidt. Through January and February, school librarians will host book discussions for their school and quadrant communities, culminating in a district-wide discussion on February 13th at Marquette High School. Rockwood educators care deeply about the mental health of all of our students, and we feel that this book will allow for more meaningful conversations among parents, staff, community members, and high school students. You can learn more at rsdmo.org, Community Read. This year's Rockwood School District Holiday e-card features the work of Eureka High School junior Olivia Royal. There's a lot of snowfall on that card if you've looked at it very closely, but more than 170 talented artists from around Rockwood submitted entries in this year's contest, and I had the honor and/or burden of choosing the winner for this design contest. Olivia's graphic design piece features, as I said, snow falling and a very cozy holiday scene. Compete with pine trees, red buildings, and snow-capped roofs, and red flatbed trucks and snowmen. To be clear, that snowfall on that day would absolutely lead to a snow day. This design reads warm wishes and happy holidays. Congratulations to Olivia, and thank you to all of our students who participated in this year's Rockwood holiday card. As we head into the following days before break on Thursday, I would like to take this moment to wish all of our Rockwood students, staff members, and families, as well as our community members, a happy holiday season full of fun, relaxation, and quality time for loved ones. So before this video plays, I want to go back to what I said at the beginning. We hear you. We can clearly see the signs that are out here. We hear you. We're more than willing to come back at the table and have additional conversation. I think that this is a part of a multi-stage effort that we have to figure out. That's not just teachers. We as a district, as employees, as board members, as community, we've got to figure out how to get something back on a ballot so that we can do something so that we are successful as we ultimately move forward. So I just want to say that before we jump to actually watch this video. But thank you for what you do every day. And on this video, you'll see that I joined a number of students from a cappella group at Lafayette High School, and we want to wish everyone a very happy holiday season.
One seems to hear words of good cheer from everywhere, filling the air. All around the praise of the sound of heaven, together they ring while people sing songs of good cheer. Winter's here.
Rockwood School District, it's that time of the year, a very, very special time of the year, a time when we can all step back, relax, and enjoy time with family and with friends. So with that, I hope that everyone has, my genuine hope is everyone has a very safe and happy holiday season and a happy new year.
One seems to hear words of good cheer from everywhere, filling the air. All around the praise of the sound of heaven, telling together they ring while people sing songs of good cheer. Winter is here. Ding dong, ding dong, ding dong, ding dong. They send on without end their joyful tones to every home. Ding dong, ding
Thank you, President Midget.
Any board comments tonight? If not, we'll move on to the approval of the consent agenda. The motion is to approve the consent agenda items as submitted.
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion?
I'd like to comment on item 7.16. We have a sizable donation from the Callison PSO. Thank you to those parents and community that contributed. This is for their new marquee, a donation towards their new marquee. So again, thank you for the community for supporting our schools.
Any other discussion? All those in favor, please signify by yay.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. Eight point zero two, budget update with Cindy Boyes. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's stuck here. Okay. 8.01 is the annual audit management reports and year-end financial statement. And the motion is to accept the 2023-24 audit report, post-audit report, and secretary of the board report, ASBR, as presented.
So moved.
Discussion will be with Dan Steinberger and
Brian Wirtz. Good evening.
good evening.
Tonight concludes fiscal year June 30, 2024. We've been working with Kerber Eckenbreckel, who is our auditors, independent auditors, since May on the audit process. So field work concluded in October. Tonight, Brian Wirtz, who is a partner with Kerber Eckenbreckel, is here to share the results with the Board of Education on the audit for June 30, 2024. And he'll be able to answer any kind of questions you may have too. So I just want to introduce Brian Wirtz.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Appreciate you giving me the time to discuss the audit and the results. First, I just kind of want to go through what is in this annual financial report and what it all kind of means. There's an introductory section. There's various pieces of this report that are unaudited and audited. The introductory section is unaudited. One thing that it does include is the GFOA and the ASBO certificates of excellence in financial reporting. So the district every year submits the annual financial report to these two institutions, which they review the report and determine if it's meeting all the reporting requirements, disclosure requirements, and those types of things, and issue their certificate of excellence in financial reporting. So both of those certificates are in there for June 30th of 2023. Minimal comments. We get comments back every year of things that we or the district could improve on as it relates to the report itself. Those comments have been minimal in the last few years, and so I think the district should be proud of that for sure. And then we get into the financial statements, which includes our independent audit report. Then the management's discussion and analysis, which is an unaudited part of the financial statements, and that's prepared by management. And it describes the current year financial results and what kind of plans are for the future financially for the district. That is unaudited because it's non-financial in nature, so we cannot give an opinion on that. Then we get into the government-wide financial statements, which are presented on the accrual basis of accounting, and then the fund financial statements that are presented on the modified accrual basis of accounting. And then there's reconciliations to get us to link how the two reconcile between the two. The biggest differences are in the full accrual financial statements, the government-wide financial statements. We include the fixed assets of the district and the related depreciation, the bond debt, the debt related to the general obligation bonds, and probably the most significant liability is the district's proportionate share of the underfunding of the two retirement systems that they're involved in, and the other pension obligations that the district has. There is a proprietary fund which is used for self-funding the health insurance of the district. And then there are notes to the financial statements. After we get it past the notes, there is the required supplemental information, which is the budget to actual for the general and teachers fund and required pension disclosures. Then there is the supplemental information, which is the budget to actual as it relates to the capital projects and debt service funds. And then there is various statistical information. A lot of it is based on over a 10-year period of financial results of the district. Then also included is state reporting requirements and federal reporting requirements as it relates to federal programs. What I like to talk about, and I think the auditor's opinion is very good at it, but it talks about what each other's responsibilities are when it comes to an audit. It's management's responsibility to prepare the financial statements in accordance with the basis of accounting that they selected that is appropriate. And the district does report on a GAAP basis, which means your government-wide financial statements are on full accrual like a for-profit entity, and your fund financial statements are on the modified accrual basis of accounting. The other thing that is important that is the management's responsibility to design, implement, and maintain an internal control structure so that the preparation and preparation of the financial statements, there would not be a material misstatement in the financial statements that would go undetected, and to safeguard the district's assets. And then lastly, the district or the management is also required to determine if the entity is a going concern, which means will it survive another year after the date of our financial statements. It is then our responsibility to provide reasonable but not absolute assurance that the financial statements are not materially misstated. And the reason we say that is because we don't do 100% test of transactions. But we have to plan our audit, perform the engagement, to bring it to a high level of assurance that there's not a material misstatement in the financial statements. Now, the risk of not detecting a material misstatement is higher if there's fraud involved. So because there's collusion or management overriding of controls, so it makes it more difficult for us to find an error in the financial statements if that's involved. We are also required to exercise professional judgment throughout the engagement. We have to identify risk where we think there could be a material misstatement in the financial statements, and then assess those risks, develop audit procedures, and determine that those risks are mitigated with our procedures. We obtain an understanding of the internal controls of the district, so we will get an understanding of the internal controls of the district, but we do not give an opinion on the internal controls of the district. That is outside the scope of an audit. During the course of our review of the internal controls, if there were any weaknesses, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but we'd be required to report those to you. And we as well are required to determine if the entity is considered a going concern. So both sides have to do that. The most significant internal controls that we review is the revenue cycle, the expenditure cycle, the payroll cycle, and then the financial reporting, the monthly financial statements that the district puts out. We also review the internal controls as it relates to the federal programs, but again, we do not give an opinion on the internal controls as it relates to that. The types of opinions that we could issue are an unmodified opinion, which basically states that we have no reservations that the financial statements contain a material misstatement, and that's the opinion that we did issue with this audit report. So I talked about each other's responsibilities. We do perform our audit in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, government auditing standards, and uniform guidance, and that's as it relates to the Yellow Book or A133. We talked about, we did give an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. As we discussed, if in the course of our audit, if there was a control deficiency that we acknowledged as a part of our audit, we would have to depending on the size of the deficiency, determine if it needs to be reported orally or in writing. So a control deficiency is an insignificant deficiency in the internal controls. A significant deficiency is a weakness in the internal controls that could lead to a misstatement in the financial statements. And then a significant deficiency that's considered a material weakness is a weakness in the internal controls that it makes it reasonably possible that an error in the financial statements could exist and go undetected. We are happy to report that we reported no material weaknesses as it relates to financial reporting. And then we also have to look at the internal controls as it relates to compliance laws, regulations, grants, and that's as it relates to the federal programs. We're happy to report there as well that we had no non-compliance noted with that part of our audit. We are required every year to review a percentage of the federal programs that the district participates in. This year we tested the child nutrition cluster. The opinion we gave on that as it related to compliance to the child nutrition cluster was an unmodified opinion with no material weaknesses noted and no items to report under uniform guidance. We talked about the federal and state reporting part of the engagement. The state part is as it relates to budgetary and disbursement procedures, accurate disclosure of attendance records, and accurate disclosure of transportation records. That examination, part of the examination was performed in accordance with attestation standards established by the AICPA. And again, we issued an unmodified opinion on the state compliance as well. Professional standards require us to report the following communications. The significant accounting policies used to prepare the financial statements are Note A to the financial statements. We talked about the basis of accounting. There were no new accounting policies adopted, and the application of existing policies remain the same from last year. There are significant estimates in the financial statements. As we discussed, the district's proportionate share of the underfunding of the pension liabilities is a significant estimate. And we have to make you aware of that because when those estimates become reality, it could be significantly different than the estimates that's reported today. But we are required to determine that management, what procedures they use to determine those estimates and determine if they're reasonable as a part of our engagement. There were no transactions that lacked authoritative guidance or consensus. The financial statement disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear, probably other than the retirement ones. If you looked at the financial statements, that footnote alone is about 10 pages. And it's got a lot of information in it. So whether it's clear, I'm not sure, but it is consistent. We encountered no difficulties in performing the audit, and we had no disagreements with management. As we discussed, we have to take a risk-based approach. And in that risk-based approach, there's always two risks that every audit has, and that is management override of controls and improper revenue recognition. So we are required to develop audit procedures for those two risks on every audit that we do, and then also identify risks that we feel could happen to this specific audit and design procedures for that as well. The other thing that we're required to do is have an element of unpredictability in our audit, which means something that we usually don't do from an audit. We always confirm cash. We always look at the attendance and transportation records. We have to have some procedure every year that's unpredictable, that is sort of outside of what we usually do or have to do as it relates to our audit. We have compiled with the ethical requirements regarding independence. Independence is more strict as it relates to a government audit than any other audit, and we have adhered to those requirements. There were no financial statement misstatements detected as a result of our audit, which means basically if we're auditing an area and we have to make this audit adjustment for the financial statements to be in accordance with GAAP, we'd have to make you aware of that. We didn't have any of those misstatements. We obtained a representation letter from management upon the approval of the audit, which was December the 10th, 2024. That is the date that the financial statements are ready to be issued. The other significance to that date is anything from June 30th through that date, if it's a subsequent event or a commitment or contingency, we're required through that date to inquire about those things to determine if there's another disclosure or an adjustment that needs to be made to the financial statements as a result of that. After that date, we're not required to review anything past that date. The representation letter tells us from management that they gave us all the financial information that we asked for. They answered all of our questions to the best of their ability, didn't withhold information, and those sorts of things. So we talked about that. And then if management had any other consultations with any other independent accountants during the year, we'd be required to make you aware of that as well. To our knowledge, we're not aware of any of those consultations that have occurred. We'd like to express our appreciation to Carl and Dan, and obviously there's more than just those two that get us to the finish line. So we're appreciative of everybody that helps do that. As Dan says, we started in May and here we are at December, so it's quite a process. The report is well over 100 pages long. There's a lot of information in there, so it takes a lot of people doing a very good job to get us to here. So appreciate that. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. This was our team, just in case you're wondering.
Well, I will continue with my normal tradition and ask a few if I may.
Sure.
I'm just going to, I know you made the comment that you don't necessarily issue opinions on controls, but given the overall environment today, particularly in light of what's going on in the newspapers, did you see any deficiencies or anything that should cause this board concern over our credit card usage?
No, and as I said, we're not required to develop audit procedures as it relates to fraud. You know, we will inquire with management, employees, what if they have any knowledge of fraud. If they were, how would they report it? Who would they report it to? Those types of things. I can tell you our element of unpredictability this year was credit cards. And that was just, we have this knack sometimes of just finding stuff or picking the right things. And it wasn't because of anything that was going on. Obviously, we didn't know that back in May when we started the audit, but we did. That was our element of unpredictability this year.
You didn't find anything?
And we didn't find anything. No.
Okay. Second question, if I could. You know, one of our controls is the $7,500 limit for board approval, meaning that an invoice or an expense above $7,500 or above has to come to the board for review. How do you see that comparing to other school districts that you may audit? You know, are we on the low end, the high end, the middle?
Yeah, I would say most of the districts we do are in the $7,500 to $10,000 range. I think as if you were getting a management letter that had deficiencies in the internal controls, you probably would want to lower that. But since you haven't, it's really sort of what you feel comfortable with. There are other mitigating controls, like you have to get an approved purchase order before an expenditure can be made. If you go over budget, then the board has to ratify the budget and allow for those expenditures. So you have other controls. So I would say you're sort of right where everybody else is on the districts that we audit.
Okay. And then maybe a last comment, and then let somebody else, which is more of a comment, which is thank you to Cindy, Dan, and their teams for the support you all have given this effort and the audit results. So thank you.
Thank you.
All those in favor, signify by yea.
Yay.
Yay.
Any opposed?
Good evening. Now we're going to have to move this microphone a lot, I think, because Dan's going to need it up and I'm going to need it down. But I want to thank you for this opportunity to present our preliminary budget for the 25-26 fiscal year. Each year, as long as we have record, the CFO and Director of Finance have presented a preliminary budget to the board at this time of year. We have a lot of information to present to you tonight, but we welcome this opportunity. So we always remind ourselves that this is a year of development of the new strategic plan where we are partnering and planning together. Fiscal responsibility is once again part of the foundation of the district's strategic plan because it is fiscal responsibility that supports everything that the district is able to accomplish. And as you know, the budget is a year-round cycle that we begin over the summer, making preliminary revenue estimates as soon as the information comes in, setting what our budget priorities need to be, and reviewing departmental budget requests as they come in. So everything that we are presenting tonight is our preliminary budget, and we're on schedule for building the 25-26 budget. But what we have tonight, we believe, is pretty close to what will be final, that we'll present to you in May based on the information that we have available at this time. But budget work continues through the spring. And as we continue to receive information from the county and from DESE about our revenues. In May, we're going to present the proposed budget to you, and then the final budget is expected to be approved at the last June regular board meeting. So the top part of this slide reiterates the outstanding record of our finance department in earning awards that attest to the use of best practices in our budgeting and financial reporting. We're the only school district in Missouri with all of the top 3, plus a clean audit that you just heard about. A key financial factor that we use in formulating the preliminary budget is that 90% of our operating revenue comes from 4 main sources. Dan will explain these revenue sources and what drives that revenue, how we project it, and the impacts on the 25-26 budget in just a minute here. We know that 85%, over 85% of our operating expenditures are committed to the salaries, wages, and benefits of our staff. This continues to be a challenge as the cost of providing health insurance under our current plans continues to increase. Passage of Proposition 3 and its impact on our capital projects and debt service funds is considered in the budget and will be explained tonight. We'll also discuss the decline in student enrollment as we talk about revenues and some upcoming budget impacts that are just unknown at this time, which we'll talk through towards the end of tonight's presentation. The 25-26 budget priorities start with fiscal responsibility as the first priority. It starts with careful projection of revenue and expense drivers, which we'll talk a lot about tonight. Maintenance of our health insurance fund. We'll talk more about those costs in a little bit, but making sure that that fund stays solvent continues to be a major component of fiscal responsibility. Program necessity and operational necessity. Estimates will still be tweaked on those as information comes in throughout the spring, but it is a budget priority that all of our current programs will continue and will still be able to pay our utility bills into the future. A major budget priority is the sustainability of our expenditure trends. When we put a budget together, we project revenues and expenditures at least 3 years into the future so that we can determine the trend and make sure this year's budget decisions can be sustained and will not bankrupt the district. And the last component of fiscal responsibility that I've listed is maintenance of the fund balance. Board policy requires that the district's fund balance be maintained at least 22% of annual expenditures. And I'll show you some information about that again toward the end of the presentation tonight when we're looking at our financial outlook. So after fiscal responsibility as a priority over the entire budgeting process, the top priority within our operating funds is staff salaries and benefits. Our budget is designed to honor all previously negotiated salary schedules for the groups that currently have contracts in place. That's nurses, social workers, custodians, early childhood professionals, and bus drivers. It was a priority for us to offer RNEA the highest fiscally responsible increase we could offer. As is a standard in the Rockwood School District, we make it a priority to budget salary and wage increases for non-union employee groups equivalent to the RNEA increase. This is important because we already have significant staffing shortages in classroom assistants, custodians, child nutrition, transportation, and childcare, and we need to budget the highest fiscally responsible increases for these groups as well. We haven't yet completed our analysis of providing health insurance benefits for our school bus drivers, but as this board has discussed before, the lack of health insurance is contributing significantly to our staffing shortage there. We begin negotiations with Teamsters Local 610 in January, and our discussions there will include how we can fit health insurance benefits into the total package without exceeding the total salary and benefits cost increase provided to other employee groups. So we're not looking at giving the bus drivers any higher increase than any other employee group. We're just going to have to fit benefits into that. In the Capital Projects Fund, our main priority is keeping the promises of the Prop 3 campaign and prioritizing those funds. We'll talk a little bit about the Capital Projects Fund here later in the presentation. And in the Debt Service Fund, our priority is debt service, just budgeting the required principal and interest on our outstanding bonds. So now I'm going to turn the podium over to Dan Steinberge, our Director of Finance, who will explain a little bit about our funds, talk about the variances we're experiencing in the current year budget, and then go into our fiscal year 25-26 revenue projections.
All right, thank you, Cindy, and good evening again. We're just going to first start off just with the district's funds. So the district financial position is based on fund accounting. And this is a chart in the next slide as well as an additional support to our fund breakdown. Each fund has a purpose and is based on how the funds are collected. They are broken down into operating, self-sustained, and restricted funds. And these are similar funds that we have spoken to before. And for the presentation tonight, we're primarily going to focus on the district's operating funds, which is made up of the incidental and the teachers fund, the capital projects fund, which includes Proposition 3, and the debt service. So Cindy shared with you our budget cycle. As she mentioned, it's an ongoing process, year-long process. So I'm going to first just start off with a quick update on the current fiscal year 24-25. This budget was adopted in June 2024, and there have been some changes to that budget based on new and updated information as we've proceeded through the 24-25 school year. The Board of Education adopted a balanced budget. We've had some positive changes to revenue, and we've had some negative changes to our expenditures, resulting in a current updated net positive difference of about $600,000, as that chart shows there. Most of these changes are items that we have shared with you before through communications as well as other presentations. In the revenue side, we had, as we kind of presented in September when when the Board of Education set the tax rate for 2024, our local taxes came in, current taxes came in lower than we originally budgeted. We had a little change in our assessed valuation. It came in lower than what we budgeted, resulting in about a $1.2 million decrease in our projected adopted revenue. That's been offset by a different trend we've seen as we've proceeded through this year of our delinquent taxes. So that top line item of $1.2 million, that's based on the current taxes. So that's based off the 2024 assessed valuations and what we expect to receive in collections from that. The delinquent taxes are based on taxes that have not been collected yet by the district. And a lot of that is depending on when the taxpayer makes due with those payments there. And we've seen an uptick in collections on outstanding taxes, which has offset the decrease in the local taxes. Our Prop C funding, the sales tax funding, has increased based on some updated information from DESI of what they expect to fund on a per WADA basis. And our transportation revenue came in a little bit higher just as we closed out June 30, 2024, and some of the expenditures that are reimbursable through there. In regards to expenditures, where we're seeing a increase in expenditures, we've recalculated our salaries and benefits, which is typical for this time of year because when the budget's adopted in June, that's based off of information at that time. There's certainly a lot of things that happen over the next couple of months. We've had a change in that about 100,000. And the largest item there you can see as it relates to expenditures is the property and liability insurance. So this is the district's business insurance that covers our general liability, all our property and everything like that. So we have seen, again, a $1 million increase on that. So our premiums are based on a calendar year. So the information and the premiums that are set, we don't receive that until the end of November. And you've probably seen in the December board packets, the agenda items, as well as the payment that was included tonight, which represented a 28% increase in our premiums. So that is a increase that is consistent with other districts in St. Louis County. It was something that was communicated that it was expected to. We just didn't see it until November. So our premiums are through Music. So Music is a consortium of other school districts that I believe it's roughly more than 90% of Missouri school districts are involved in Music. So all of that is pooled. Music themselves have seen an increase in the claims across the state, which has impacted premiums. A lot of it is related to loss of property, of claim losses. The weather events that we've seen this past year, have significantly impacted them. Now, our insurance coverage, I would say, is very. We have a great insurance package. The district pays on all claims just a deductible of $1,000. So anything that we report as a claim that gets approved by Music, so we have to submit everything to the Music carrier. They approve it as well as a claim, and then we just pay $1,000. So just to put that in perspective, last January we had about 5 buildings that sustained over $1 million worth of losses due to the freezing temperature that we had. For that loss, we out of pocket was $1,000. So yes, the premium increase was significant. It does impact future budgets. We don't expect that we don't expect that insurance premium to decrease. It's helping to level the fund itself, but it does still provide adequate insurance coverage. So overall, the net change for June 30, 24-25 is $600,000 from that perspective. So this chart just shows a comparison of our total operating revenue. There's not much difference between 25 and 26. A little bit of a change in local, but the biggest part that kind of is provided there is that, as we've communicated before, the district is heavily locally funded. So examples of the local funding include our local taxes, Prop C, merchants and manufacturing surtax, which is a component of the local taxes, as well as investment income on our balances. So the next few slides, we're going to share those factors of a couple major revenue sources. Cindy mentioned we have over 90% of our operating budget is through 4 sources. And like all budgets, our revenue sources are important to support our expenditures. We're going to start with our largest source of local property taxes. So local taxes are based on our assessed valuation of real estate, commercial, and personal property. The assessed valuation is determined by local counties. We are provided that information every August and September. And then each year, each even calendar year is a non-reassessment year. So when we presented the tax rate in September of 24, it was based on a non-reassessment year, which we typically see small increases in our assessed valuation, as we've communicated about that before. Every odd calendar year is a reassessment year. So that's essentially when the county goes through their studies and their portfolios and apply the changes to the valuations of those properties. And that's typically where we see larger increases in assessed valuation. The chart here shows the last few years of assessed valuations. As I kind of mentioned, we had a little bit of decrease in the 24-25. We had budgeted for an increase in 1.06%. But when the actual assessed valuation came in from the county, it was half of that at 0.57, and that attributes to the 1.2 million decrease in revenue here. I'm gonna try to talk a little louder over the rain here. So for 25-26, which is a reassessment year, we typically would budget a little bit over 3% in reassessment years, but knowing, and as that chart kind of shows there, the last couple of reassessment years, we've been higher than the 3%. Sorry. We've been higher than the 3%. So based on these current trends, we have set our 25-26 assessed valuation to be budgeted at 5.06% increase. And that shows a 5.7 billion assessed valuation. So the Hancock Amendment is typically a factor in reassessment years. This is something we usually talk about when we set the tax rate. So the Hancock Amendment is applied by taking the lower of the CPI rate, or 5%. This safeguards taxing entities from receiving large windfalls in revenue when property assessed valuations increase. The tax rate calculation has many factors, but this chart here shows how the Hancock Amendment is applied. So going back to September of 23, which was the last calendar year where we had reassessment, our assessed valuation increased 16.2%. If we were able to apply the same tax rate as September of 22, that would have resulted in 25.4 million increase in revenue. However, because of the Hancock Amendment, which was purposely in place, our revenue was limited to the lower of the two factors that I had mentioned, which in this case for 23 was 5%. So to achieve this, our tax rate was lowered to 3.1307. And based on the current data, we expect our revenue in 25-26 to be limited to CPI, which is currently lower than the 5%. This is a chart you have seen before and summarizes our tax rate. We expect our 25-26 tax rate to be just below or at the current rate, which continues to be the lowest over the past 9 years that it's presented up here. The tax rate calculation is based on a formula reviewed and certified by the state auditor's office. So we get the information from the county, we run the calculations, and then we also submit it to the state auditor's office for review. And before we can publish it to the Board of Education for approval, we have to get that certification. So taxing entities cannot arbitrarily increase the tax rate to generate additional revenues. They must have voter approval. This chart does show the tax levy transfer that was approved by the community back in November of 23 as it relates to Proposition 3. In the lower part, in the kind of lighter blue section there, you can see that the increase in the capital fund has been offset by the decrease in the debt service fund, resulting in that net no tax increase as promised during Proposition 3. So here's a summary of our local assessed tax calculation for 25-26. We are, as I mentioned, budgeting a 5.06% increase in assessed valuation, tax rate to remain relatively flat. At this time, our forecasting for local taxes does not include any impact that we may have from Senate Bill 190. The information simply is not there. The county is currently going through the application process. We do not expect any information, any data until the earliest July or August, right when we come back to you to set the 2025 tax rate. And we may not truly see any impact from Senate Bill 190 for a couple of years as this program rolls out. There's lots of moving parts that are going on with that. We're going to continue to monitor that. But with that being said, we have not factored any impact from Senate Bill 190 as part of our calculations. Moving on to revenue drivers that are based on enrollment. Student enrollment is a factor in our basic formula from the state. We have previously shared how the district is in a declining enrollment environment. This chart here kind of summarizes that our enrollment over the last couple of years. We typically are seeing a 1 to 2% decrease on average over the last couple of years. As you know, we are currently going through a demographic study that will provide additional information on our enrollment projections. The 25-26 projection above here, this is based on our internal projection model, which takes into account cohort survival rate, as well as other factors such as if we have any residential development going on and other impacts that relates to enrollment. So for 25-26, we are projecting a decrease of another 200 students. As I kind of mentioned, student enrollment is a factor in our state funding because the weighted average daily attendance of our enrollment is used in the calculation from the state formula. To provide a safety net for schools experiencing declining enrollment, districts are allowed to use the highest WADA, weighted average daily attendance, of the current year or the 2 previous school years. Because of the impact to student attendance during the pandemic, the state funding formula did look a little different for a couple of years. This chart here shows that the district was allowed to use the 2019-20 WADA of 18,594 from 2019-20 through 23-24. We've had a lot of conversation over the last couple of years of how the state formula has been impacted, or I'm sorry, the district's formula has been impacted by that provision. The actual WADA for these school years is on the line below that, which kind of shows the declining, which is impacted by the declining enrollment. Beginning with 24-25, we are using the regular formula, so we've gone back to that. As you can see from this chart, our 25-26 WADA using the formula is 17,114 up to the right there. If you compare that to where our highest was just 2 years ago, it's a decrease of 1,480 from that impact. Fortunately, this decline in WADA has been offset by the increase in the state adequacy target. So the state adequacy target is the factor that the state provides in the funding level through the basic formula. The chart below there kind of shows what it has been. You can see for 4 years, it was held flat at 63.75. In this school year, 24-25, it increased to 67.60. And in 25-26, it's currently projected to go up to 71.45. And that is based on current guidance from DUSE. Now, the question remains as to whether the state will be able to fund that. We're actively monitoring the outcomes of prior legislative actions and general revenue collections at the state level because school funding comes from the general revenue fund. So I know there's been reports and news about how current collections and information we actually received back in October that, currently in 24-25, general state collections at the state level is down almost 0.6%. So this is just a summary of the state formula and all the factors that go into it. There's a lot of information there. I just want to kind of reiterate that the state adequacy target is increasing in 25 and 26. And then based on current information, we expect it to remain flat. It does include the incentive of having a minimum of 169-day school debt calendar beginning in 25-26. We will start to see the decrease in state funding in 26-27 because of the declining enrollment. And what that chart there is intended to provide is kind of, as I kind of mentioned before, the state formula where it looks back on the highest of the current or the previous 2 school years. So that top line item, the district's actual WADA, is what our actual WADA was for those school years. Obviously for 24-25 through 27-28, those are projections based on their current enrollment and trends. And then that second line item, a district formula WADA, that kind of shows the number that's being used in the actual formula for reimbursement. So you can see our 23-24 WADA of 17,114 will be first used in 25-26. Then you kind of see how it shifts to the right there. In a declining enrollment environment, that is common to see that every year it's just shifting over. You can see that in 25-26, we do expect a $5.7 million increase in state formula revenue. And again, that is mainly due to the expected increase in the state adequacy target to 7145, which at this time is currently projected to remain flat. And then the decrease in the WADA will be impacted with loss of revenue through 28. Other revenue factors and assumptions, Prop C, which is a major source of our revenue, we are expecting a 3.5% increase over the current year. That is impacted by the declining enrollment as well, because it's based on the prior year weighted average daily attendance. Obviously, right now we do not have the 24-25 weighted average daily attendance, so we're projecting what we expect it to be next year. The merchants and manufacturing surtax is a component of local taxes that the district has the ability to allocate as they see appropriate. In reviewing our financial forecasting, we have 36 cents, equivalent of 36 cents going into the capital fund. So beginning in 25-26, we are recommending that we move that over into the teachers' funds. So it will be about a $3.5 million increase to that fund, just to help with our expense projections. As you can see, we have the phase out of the big program, which is about just less than $1 million decrease in revenue. Our state funding, transportation for 25-26, we are expecting this to be funded at 40% of the 75%. So the last couple of years, we've been fully funded. It's been the state's priority to do that. Based on information we are expecting out of with some of the legislative action that's happened in the last year, we are expecting transportation funding to be one of the first items that is cut in the state budget. So currently we are expecting 25-26 to be at 40%. 24-25 is at 100%. Any change to that will impact beginning in 25-26. County, federal, and other revenue, it's less than 2% of our total revenues. Everything there remains relatively flat. I just want to mention that our ESSER funding, which has been a topic of conversation in the last couple of years, expired September 30th, 24. District has fully used our allocation, and we've completed all our reporting to the state as required by the deadlines. So this chart here kind of summarizes all the revenue, kind of wraps everything together, kind of shows the first two columns, just it summarizes where I mentioned change in our revenue for the current year, just about $1 million increase in 24-25. And then for 25-26, we are expecting, based on the factors we just went over, about a $9.3 million increase in revenue, which has been a part of our projections since we've been communicating and projecting since September. So. And this chart here just kind of summarizes the local revenue. As I kind of mentioned, 80% of the 25-26 budget is from local sources. This is just another breakdown, kind of puts it in a little bit of a chart just to show of that 84% of the assessed taxes makes up that large portion of local revenue sources. So before I turn this back over to Cindy for expenditures, as we kind of transition, does anybody have any questions on the revenue factors that we've discussed?
Dan, on slide, I think it's 14. Get back to it. When we've talked a lot about the decrease in enrollment in the district, correct?
Correct.
So, and one of the things I keep looking at is there a particular level, and it's sort of diverse across the whole district. When we look at the VIC enrollment decrease, do we know relatively where that falls into the levels of a decrease across the district, though?
Yeah,
Is that a portion of that?
it is a portion. So what we're seeing with the program is
Which we have no
beginning-
control over that, right?
No, in beginning of 23, 24, there were no new students from the program that are entering into the program. So we're seeing the natural progression of going through their grade levels, exiting out of the school.
Got it. Okay.
The one consequence of that is that there are situations where siblings are being pulled
Still,
as well,
right.
right? So
Oh, yes, they exit, then they're pulling some siblings to stay with them.
versus a family potentially being
Okay.
split, yes.
Yes. Thank you.
Of course, I have a couple. So just to make sure, I asked this publicly, although I think we both all know the answer because you kind of said it. We essentially had some money we could out reallocate because of Prop 3. We cannot use that money for salaries, can we?
So the reallocation,
So
if you're referring to the
Prop 3.
So Prop 3 is correct. Specifically goes into capital fund. Salaries and benefits cannot be paid out of that. It strictly goes to funding the Prop 3 initiative of cycle maintenance, technology, and safety items.
So if I look at slide 9, if you can give me a minute to get there. Although we had a general revenue increase of 986, 893 of that was Prop 3, which really isn't discretionary if you want to think of it that way. It has to go to capital projects.
So excuse me. So on this chart here, it's actually Prop C. And if I mention Prop 3, I apologize.
I missed that.
The
I apologize. For
terminology kind of
Yep.
crossed, but
Nope.
yeah, Prop C is the
Yep.
sales tax piece of it.
Nope. Thank you very much. Following that, though, just again to be clear, we did have a period here of increased inflation a year or two ago. It's coming down. But even if this board wanted to, we are limited to the lower of the CPI or 5%. So when inflation hit 7% or whatever it did 2 years ago, we were limited to a 5% increase in our tax rate.
That's correct.
Okay. So what would then be, I don't know whether I should wait for this or not.
Go ahead.
The fund balance you're projecting is July, but that's not our low point. Our low point is October before the new monies start coming in. So what do we have a projection of what we're thinking for what we would look like in October?
Yes. So again, when we look at fund balance percentage, we look at specifically how it's going to look at June 30, which
Right.
helps us forecast the low points, as you kind of mentioned. So there are times throughout that period where we do get below the 22%. But from a cash standpoint, that allows us to get through that. We're comfortable with there. So looking into next year in October of 25, specifically as it relates to the 25-26 budget, we'll be close to about 15%. But based on our expenditure model as well as the revenue model there, that is sufficient for us to get through. And that's because of the balances that we have at June 30 that allow us to get to that point. So we are comfortable and confident that it will not require any kind of tax anticipation notes, which is borrowing.
I'll wait to your section for my other questions here, but thank you. So essentially what that means is, yeah, we I'm going to say it this way. We look fat on June 30th, but we're going to continue to go down because we got no revenue coming in over the summer. We're going to continue to pay salaries, and then we're going to level out at 15%, but then money's going to start coming right back in again to replenish the coffers.
That's correct.
So that's our balance there is.
That's why it's important. Yeah.
Is 15%.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm going to turn it over to Cindy.
Okay, Bob, you did touch on one thing that I wanted to emphasize, and that is that there is some money that was previously placed in the capital projects fund that we are now placing in the teachers fund. But that is not tax revenue. That is the merchants and marines revenue that comes from the state that the board is allowed to place in any fund that they want. So when we were in a fix on failure mode, we needed it. This year, since we have Prop 3, we're able to move it into the teachers fund, which allows us to budget it there for teacher salaries and benefits as opposed to fix on failure. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so every year, development of our expenditure estimates starts with evaluation of the staffing levels. We work closely with HR in providing our enrollment projections, and they look at class sizes, caseloads. We take a look at what staffing is in not only positions that have class sizes and caseloads, but in workloads of support positions also. We evaluate the staffing requests that come in to address specific needs across the district. And this year, we're not anticipating any increase in FTE, no net increase in FTE of any admin or support staff positions. Our budget includes salary schedules for employee groups that are currently in a negotiated agreement at the amounts required by those contracts. We budgeted a total salary expense increase of 5.25 for employees who are on the RNEA salary schedule. We every year do salary and wage comparisons for support staff. That's positions that are not in a negotiated group, because that needs to take place internally. And we have budgeted an average 5.25% increase for employee groups that are not in a negotiated agreement. We've budgeted, we have several areas where we have significant vacancy rates: custodial, food service, bus drivers, and childcare are the top 4. In those areas, we've budgeted a 25% fill rate. We would hire them all if we got that many applicants, but we just know that that is probably not going to happen within the next 12 months. Under benefits, some good news that we received recently is that the PSRS and peers contribution rates are not being increased for fiscal year 26. So we can keep that at the same percentage of salaries and benefits that it's been in the past, instead of having to increase that. As you know, we have a self-insured health insurance program. And so I want to explain that a little bit. Some of our people who are covered don't even really realize that when they get an explanation of benefits and a claim has been paid, that's not an insurance company paying that. We have a third-party administrator who administers our plan. So the papers that come to you in the mail look like insurance company papers. But when those claims are paid, that's Rockwood paying those claims. And so we need to be sure that our reserve funds that allow us to pay those claims, the premiums, we set the premiums that we pay ourselves into our own fund. And as you know, we've paid an additional $10 million over the past 3 years, and we have budgeted to pay another $3 million in this year to limit the premium increases for dependent coverage and retirees. So it's going to cost Rockwood, if we raise the premiums on ourselves, on our own district, it's going to cost us that increase for the eligible employees, of course. We're also covering part of the increase that should be made but is not being made for dependent coverage for employees that pay that select dependent coverage. Okay, some of the expenditure considerations under operational necessity. We want to ensure adequate program budgeting. We go over all the department budgets with the department heads and make sure that they have what they need with what we have to work with. Keeping our percentages the same, keeping that 85% towards salaries and benefits. We have to monitor inflationary costs and the supplies and services. Supplies and services make up about 10% of our operating budget. So that's one of the things that'll be tweaked a little bit as the springtime comes along, as contracts come in and we review them for what the costs are going to be over the next fiscal year. There's many times when we push back against those increases and keep it to the level of inflation, keep it to a level that we can afford without having to go without those items. We have to provide for the increases in property and liability insurance coverage. Dan talked a little bit about music, and I'm going to show you some more about that in a minute. And then we have to provide for utility rate increases over which we have no control. Okay, so this is another graph that you've seen before, and it shows that our percentages from year to year are staying just about the same for all the different items in the budget. Okay, so this lists the major categories of our expenditures. We're projecting for fiscal year 26 with all those assumptions that I mentioned earlier, a 1% net change in fund balance. A net change in fund balance that's less than 1% of our total expenses. As you know, our fund balance dollar amount has to increase as our expenditures increase in order to keep that same percentage. So even though we have a 1% net change in fund balance, it only results in a 0.2% increase in our fund balance. This is actually, though, on a trend toward a decrease in fund balance, and I'm going to show you that in just a couple of slides. Come on. Okay. I'm going to turn it back over to Dan, and he'll tell us about the Capital Projects Fund.
Okay, this chart here just summarizes our tax rate for 23, 24, and 25. 25 obviously being projected for the 25-26 fiscal year. This shows how our tax rate is expected to remain flat. It reflects the promise of the Prop 3 transfer. You can see how the increase in Capital Projects Fund, which is the orange highlighted section there, has increased in 24 and 25. And that increase, which was 36 cents in 24, and the remaining 18 cents will happen in 25 for the 54 cents transfer, has been offset by the decrease in the debt service, which is that lower, darker blue highlighted section there at the bottom there. So the decrease related with the increase in the capital projects is what we have accomplished, and this is what we said we were going to do during the Proposition 3. So this graph, again, just in the Capital Projects Fund. So just to summarize quickly, the previous funds we talked about were operating with related to incidental and teachers. This is the Capital Projects Fund there. Again, this just shows the funding changes in the Capital Projects Fund that's directly related to Proposition 3, which is that orange highlighted section there. You can see with the 36 cents that we transferred over, 18.9 million was related to Proposition 3. And then for 25-26, when we complete the transfer for the full 54 cents, we have just shy of 30 million in the fund there. You can see the lower portion there with some of the changes that we are recommending for 25-26. specifically related to the M&M surtax. You can see how the change in other capital revenues have decreased. And then also you can see a lot of that decrease from the 25 is related to ESSER 3 funding, which we had kind of mentioned how it expired this year. We got all our reimbursement this year. So for our capital projects fund, the budget considerations, as we kind of mentioned, we are recommending the reallocation of approximately $3.5 million from the capital projects fund to the teachers fund. We have completed the expenditure of all our ESSER allocation in 25, so we expect no further ESSER funds going into next year. We will complete the 25, we will complete in 25 the second phase of the Prop 3 levy transfer. Again, any increase in the capital fund is being offset by the decrease in the debt service as promised. We are budgeting expenditures for Prop 3 projects to equal Prop 3 revenues. So 100% of the Prop 3 revenues coming in will go into cycle maintenance, safety, and technology items. We are working with the Capital Planning Advisory Committee. We did have our first meeting with the committee back in November. We provided a lot more detailed information to them, included a lot of great conversations and discussions on how we prioritize projects and where we look for the next couple of years. I thought it was a great start to the committee. We will meet quarterly to review that information. Each meeting will have something different of what we present and just to inform them. And we had great feedback too from the committee. So at the end of the meeting, there was a survey sent out, and it was great to hear that all the information that was presented by Cindy that evening had met expectations, and there were no surprises that evening. So similar to other charts, this here just summarizes the capital projects fund, comprised of Prop 3 as well as our other capital funding programs there. For 24-25, as was presented in November, we did pay off our final payment for the bus leases. So starting next year, you can see in 25-26 that there's no budget there for lease payments, and an amount has been moved up to the vehicles line item to help with our refresh buses. So now that we have all buses paid for, we can move forward with our plan of making sure that our vehicles, our buses, have a refresh associated with them. This is a slide that was provided to the Capital Advisory Committee, just kind of summarizes our, 25-26 expenditures through the capital fund. You can see that 5.6 million is essentially the current capital fund that we have in place to take care of all of our bus needs, equipment and furniture and other capital repairs. Includes also about 1.8 million in fix on failure. We do have some funding there set aside from our 4 cents that's in the capital fund to assist with that for any items that do come up that aren't planned that we can control within that budget. We have approximately 3.3 million that's allocated to safety and security for door access controls, radios and cameras, ADA compliance. 6 million set aside for technology to continue with refresh of classroom technology and infrastructure, and about 20.3 million for cycle maintenance for HVAC, roofs, paving, continue on with projects that have been identified by Chris Friend and his team and as part of his cycle for addressing those items. A quick slide on the debt service fund. So as we kind of mentioned, 25-26 will have the completion of the debt service transfer to capital projects. So what this just shows here is that with that levy transfer, we'll have a remaining tax rate of 14 cents to cover all of our remaining general obligation principal on previously issued bond issues. Our balance there is at the far right column there. And what this shows is that the 14 cents is sufficient to satisfy that debt and our estimates are coming in to what we expected as we were going through Proposition 3. Okay, and to kind of round us up for the evening, I'm going to turn it right back to Cindy to close it out.
Okay, 3 more slides. I think these are some of the most important. So what this slide shows is using the same priorities and assumptions and as we've used for the 25-26 budget and carrying those through the next 3 years projected. This shows a trend from a balanced budget in fiscal year 25-26 to a deficit of $5 million in 27-28. This is why we always project, is because even though it looks like we're breaking even in the first year, we've set ourselves on a trend that is going to be using some reserves. It is going to result in deficit spending for the next 2 years. And I have to tell you, I would not typically present a budget that showed any deficit spending on a trend this way, but we are presenting this budget with planned use of reserves because we don't believe, I mean, Dan and I both believe that this is not setting us on a dangerous trajectory, but one that's just going to use some reserves and we'll have to manage it over the next 3 years. It's not a nosedive, but it's one that I believe we can manage. I want to show you, and so the reason for it though is so that we can provide the highest level of pay increases as is fiscally responsible. And so we're claiming that a $5 million deficit in 3 years is still fiscally responsible. I do want you to be sure that you're aware of things that could impact this though. So what this shows is, Dan mentioned our music premium increase that was about $1 million. If we project that increase out, you can see that that music premium increase, just the impact of $1 million higher than what we have budgeted now, utilizes a full 1.7% of our fund balance over the next 3 years. Where before we were projecting a fund balance of 32.9% at the end of 2028, with just that $1 million increase, we're down to a projected fund balance of 31.2%. Also, remember that Senate Bill 190 is not factored in. Senate Bill 190 should not reduce our revenues, but it should, it is going to reduce our increase in revenues. And we aren't able to project what that amount will be yet. All aspects of Senate Bill 727, which was the omnibus education bill, have not yet been factored in. The decrease in transportation from 75% to 40% of the 75% is factored in. But there's a lot of state revenue risk right now. The full SAT for fiscal year 25, the year that we're in right now, has not yet been appropriated from the legislature. Another indication that we need to tread carefully and possibly increase our required fund balance from the 22% level is that Moody's recently revised, Moody's is one of the bond rating companies, recently revised its outlook for the K-12 public school sector from stable to negative. So if Moody's is looking at the average school district as negative, they're not going to give it a AAA rating. We're going to have to be especially financially healthy to maintain that AAA rating. So the first 3 items on here are things that I just mentioned to you. And as I showed you before, the budgeting goes on through the spring. And in May, we'll bring a proposed budget to you that will ask to be approved in June. And our financial planning continues to focus on maintaining a 22% operating reserve because that's policy right now. maintaining our AAA rating, and preventing tax anticipation notes, and closely aligning our long-term goals with the new strategic plan. What questions can we answer for you?
So Cindy, I have one question. Help me understand. One of the reasons that we want to keep this AAA rating is so that, well, if we go to the voters for bonds, we're able to get better rates. Am I saying that correctly?
Better interest rates, right?
Better
It's
interest
like
rates.
having
If we
it's
lose
like a
our
personal
AAA,
credit rating.
we will not be able to get the best rates.
That's correct.
Okay. So it's not just a feel-good thing. It's
Right.
It's financially in our best interest.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes.
I have a question that goes back several slides, but I don't think you'll need to click back. It has to do with the district's contributions toward employees' dependents
Mhm.
of 50%, which if we're putting another 3 million a year into there, do you have any idea what the effective rate really is, of what the breakdown is of the true cost of dependent coverage that the employee's paying versus what the district's paying? Even a ballpark.
I don't think we know that off the top of our heads. We could look that up for you. We are able to calculate it, but
Okay.
we haven't done that
No
in
problem.
some time.
And my other question is, so in the second bullet on the previous slide,
Mhm.
plan short-term use of reserves over the next 3 years, can you tell me what makes you confident that that will be short-term? Because even though it's not a nosedive, as you said,
Mhm.
a downward trajectory is a downward trajectory.
Mhm.
I'm assuming there are some factors that make you feel like that's
Mhm.
going to level out.
Mhm. Well, so there are a couple things that make me feel comfortable with that. One is that while revenues, we've done the very best job we can at projecting revenues for this budget. I really don't believe any new additional information is going to come out between now and that May report. I think these are the same revenues you're going to see then, or same projected revenues. But on the expenditure side, that is assuming that we still have the exact same everything in place for the next 3 years. We know that our enrollment is declining. We know that we've got a demographic study going on. I believe that there is going to be some adjustment there to our expenditure side of things that's going to help us. Another thing is we have found that our projections for expenses are typically more conservative than we end up actually having. So if you look over the past few years of what we've actually spent versus budget, we've come under budget. We always come under budget. And so that's going to give us a little bit of flexibility there.
So, of course, I have a few questions. The thing that I've said before that keeps me up at night is we get to the April, May timeframe, we turn the AC on in one of our buildings and it doesn't work. And we've already got the buildings we're planning to modernize already laid out. And as I recall from the capital planning meeting that we had last month, even after 3 or 4 years, we are still going to have a significant number of buildings that have an over 30-year-old HVAC system to it.
Mhm.
It's going to be a 8-10 year project to get everything modernized again, not a 1-2 year project.
Mhm.
So to me, that's a realistic worry. All right, not a fact. I can't
Mhm.
say we're going to have that happen, but it's a worry.
Mhm.
What roughly do we have any idea if something happened like that? What's the impact? Is it $20,000 or $20 million?
So it does keep me up some nights too, Bob, so you're not alone. So most of our buildings, even our buildings with old 4-pipe systems, it is not the entire building
Mhm.
that is going to go out at once. And so, we had an issue at Ellisville just a couple weeks ago, where four-pipe system went down. We were able to keep school in session, but we did have to make some repairs. So anyway, couple points. One is that we can usually do some repairs. They're going to get us some good mileage on that. And so that we're not going to have to wake up one morning and find that we have to replace an entire system. However, if that were to happen, our average budget for replacing an HVAC system that we've got in Prop 3 right now is about $3 million per building. High schools are more than that, but that's for our average size building. It's about $3 million. And so, it's not going to bankrupt us to have to do that. That would come, though, out of our capital projects fund, and which does have a small fund balance right now.
Okay. And then, the other piece that has me a little worried here is we have the decreasing enrollment, but we also have a lot of talk in the legislature about open enrollment and the potential transfer of funds to go with the student. Assuming the legislature gave us a little warning and didn't pass a bill in April that was effective the following September, that it was effective in the future, do we have any levers that would allow us to plan for a significant reduction in revenue like that?
Well, different people are bringing up different proposals on this, and it gets quite complicated. I think just about any open enrollment type of plan, unless it's just among public schools. So like they open the borders between public schools, which is one of the proposals. If that happens, the current proposed legislation that is out there lets school boards make the decision of whether or not they're going to let that happen. And it's unpredictable whether that's going to pass or whether, what school districts are going to do with that if it does pass. But our general feeling is that if that sort of thing came about, we'd actually be gaining students rather than losing them. So our real risk is open enrollment with private institutions, right? So if they suddenly said, okay, the state also has to pay that SAT amount out, or an equivalent amount out to private schools, I think that the entire entire school funding program would have to be rewritten. So, one would hope that they would give us some lead time on that. It would be devastating, and not only to Rockwood, but to a lot of school districts across the state.
And then maybe a last question here. I know you said we budgeted 4 vacancy rates, but we'd love it if we got them all filled, and I agree completely. If we did get them all filled, what kind of an impact would that be to us?
It might be a Dan question.
Yeah, as kind of mentioned, we do budget for 25% of vacancies, and that's just because that's what we're seeing the trend come through. But if we would ever get back to the level that we had, it would cost about $2.9 million. That's salaries and benefits that would go back into the budget across all departments. So we're talking custodial, transportation, child nutrition, and other maintenance positions. So is where we're seeing the biggest impact.
Given our steady state, given our forecast today, if we did increase our fill rate, our $5 million deficit 3 years from now would turn into $7 or $8 million, roughly.
Adjustments would need to be made, correct?
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the amount. Did you say 3.9 million?
2.9.
2.9 million.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
If I could just add, I think that the questions about open enrollment are going to be an ongoing question. When we talk 3 years from now, if we don't have some degree of compromise or settlement when it comes to that, it will be an ongoing issue. I think that the work of the board, one, to form the advocacy committee, and then two, us working to proactively get that word out, not just to staff within our district, but to stakeholders in our district, is really, really important for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I mean, that's the concern I have, is that the state will decide to fund open enrollment to private schools, which they've talked about, they haven't done it yet. And, that's where it hits us as a financial impact.
Cindy spoke to a number of potentials of what could happen there. One, will boards have the right to locally govern and communities ultimately locally control what is happening?
Right.
Is a legitimate question. Look at the start of our school calendar. Number two is, what does it look like? There are huge variances of taxation rates, not just within St. Louis County. You start talking about outside of county, it becomes very, very complex. Even a year of study is one thing, but in theory, it could be turn around. It could turn around, and this is August of 25 when we're talking about reality. So there are a number of very complex, long-ranging impacts with decisions and conversations in this topic.
Cindy or Dan, do you have, and you might not have it tonight, but the total amount that we spend on dependent coverage?
That's something else we would have to look up for you.
Okay.
So we can, very soon here, we're going to be getting information on the plan year that ended October 31st. And so it'll allow us, we'll start that premium setting process, and it'll allow us to have a lot more information. So that'll be a good time to really be
That'd be
able to
great.
analyze
Yeah.
this.
Thanks.
Cindy, again, that was $3.3 million this past June or so.
That we contributed?
Yes.
It'll be at the, as budgeted, 25, 26 right now. It'll bring it to 13.5 million over the past 4 years.
But we're fishing from the same bucket.
Yes.
That's a part of conversation, right? It's a part of consideration with all of this. I haven't seen any tangible example of costs as relates to benefits actually being controlled. And I want to be clear, that's not a Rockwood issue. That is a national issue. But it still is a factor when it comes to the brass tacks of a budget of a significant source of consideration. We have to budget and consider that, or there's a push-pull there, right? There's something that ultimately has to give. But that's just, of all of the factors that are being discussed, it's just another one that has to be considered when it comes to our budget.
Thanks again for the very, very, very
Thank you.
comprehensive report. 9.01, proposed agenda for the January 16th, 2025 Board of Education meeting. It's up on the screen. That will be a few weeks from now. And 9.02, future agenda presentations and events to attend. Be checking the calendars as always. Check in with Cindy. There's things that will be coming up in January. But until then, have a wonderful, wonderful holiday season. And thank you so much to everyone out there who stayed till the very end. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.